So, in doing my meditation this morning, I thought to elaborate a little on the core of the meditation practice I learned over the last week. Because yesterday I talked about the importance of the loving kindness practice, and that is really essential for me right now. It's probably really essential for everyone. Um, but the purpose of the retreat I was on was not about the loving kindness meditation. That was just something that I needed in order to deal, in order to be able to sit with myself, to do the practice that was at hand. And so I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. The practice was about achieving samadhi, which I did not, but I have a life, or as many as I need, I suppose, to do that. So the basic meditation technique from Theravada Buddhism is focusing on the physical sensation of the breath coming in and out through your nose, and most specifically the tip of your nose, like just the way, feeling the wind of the breath moving at the tip of your nose. That's not particularly important as far as a place. There's no physical significance to that specifically, except if the idea of samadhi is stillness, unwaveringness, complete and total security. So the heart meditation I was talking about yesterday, the goal of it, if you will, is to train your heart to always live in a safe space of love, and eventually compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. These are the 4 skillful emotions that you can have with your heart. All the other emotions, they say, are not very skillful because they lead to more suffering. But so that the intention of that is to get to a place of security that the heart can live in. So similarly with the mind, the practice of samadhi, which was the penultimate achievement in meditation until the Buddha, so for let's say 2,500 years, but who knows, but probably about that, in Hinduism. Of course, Buddhism sprang out of Hinduism. Was to be able to find samadhi. And that means allowing the mind to come to one point and not waver. So there are Pali words and Sanskrit words that describe this, but I'm just going to talk in English because that's the language that we're probably all thinking and talking in. Besides saying things like samadhi, I don't know ekapada and all those things properly. But the idea is that when you're breathing in and out through your nose, you're trying to make all of your consciousness, all of the mind, focus on just that sensation. So you're using your physical body, which is important, because your physical body is going to constantly ask for other attentions. It will, tell you your legs are sore, or you need to drink, or get up and do something, or write something down, in my case often. And that may or may not be important. But at that point, it's not important. When you're choosing to meditate, you can set a timer. You can say, I'm going to meditate for an hour every day, or 20 minutes every day. And I do get it that people think that, well, I meditate for 5 minutes. I have friends who say that. I'm like, okay. But in 5 minutes, like, the dust hardly gets a chance to settle. Until you get really, really good at it, maybe. I don't know. I suppose if you do 5 minutes of meditation like 70 times throughout the day, then that's great. I right now, because I just came off of meditating 6 hours a day, I'm finding like even meditating 2 hours a day is not really doing it for me the same way, but it's still feeling essential. Anyway, so feeling the breath coming in and out through the nose, the important part of it being physical is that the body's going to ask for a lot of other physical attention. And it's an opportunity not to ignore the body, but to choose what you're paying attention to and stick to that decision. And that's, for some of us, again, is more essential than others. For me, it's essential training. And if you can focus on one thing and hold your attention and focus on one thing, then the time doesn't actually matter. But it's like a muscle. I mean, I found during the retreat that I would be trying, I would get close, and I would get exhausted. I literally, I'd be sitting there. It's really nice to have a posture that's very straight for lots of physiological reasons that can be related to mysticisms. But you're just more attentive, and getting back into the healing aspect, and this isn't specifically about healing at all, it's about one-pointedness. But along the way to one-pointedness, you have to have a foundation. So one of the things that I find is when I'm in a posture and I'm working on getting to my breath, I'm not even going to get into the mind chatter right now, but the body chatter. I'll feel my feet being sore. But more importantly, I'll feel tension in my shoulders. And as a body worker, I know that all of us, every single one of us, carry around tension and pain all the time. We all just live with lots of tension and pain that fades into the background like the white noise that we don't notice. And in meditation, it's an opportunity to acknowledge that pain and tension when you're sitting there, and especially in a good posture that you choose to sit in. You're sitting in a good posture that you choose to sit in, and just trying to focus on the breath, and you'll feel like, wow, my right shoulder is so tight. Your body tells you this. You can hear it because you're listening. And then you have the option to let it go. And that's, at this point, when you're focusing on the breath, the option about everything else, all of the other body sensations and all of the other thoughts, is to let them go. So with the body sensations, they can be as tricky as the thoughts, in that they're like, no, I've really got to pee, or no, my feet are gonna die. Like, my body was doing that. Like the circulation is getting cut off when you sit in a position. And it is true, you have to find the right position that for you to sit in. I was struggling for like 3 days finding a position that I could sit in without being in excruciating pain, and I ended up having to sit on a meditation bench, and I found the right way to sit on a meditation bench so that it wasn't hurting me, and I could keep my spine straight and release those tensions. My feet would still fall asleep and go numb, but they wouldn't be in excruciating pain, and that might be because I lost the fear, or it might be because I was sitting in the right position for me. I don't know. But again, there are things that your body will tell you are important. And ultimately, when you get really good at the training, it's about being able to notice these things that the body are saying and acknowledge them in a way that you pay attention to them enough to let them go. A lot of things you can only let go once you have acknowledged them. And there's so many things that the body is saying to us all the time that we're not hearing, so it's just constantly screaming. But if you give yourself time to acknowledge it, then it can just shut up and release, and you can let it go. And I know that a lot of times in this meditation technique, I've been, I was like, wow, my neck's really tight, and I can let that go. So it stops bothering me. But it has the added benefit of all of a sudden I'm not carrying around that tension in my neck and my back and my shoulder and my lower back and my thighs, whatever. So that's a really useful thing that has a side effect of being healing. Likewise with the mind, there will be thoughts that come up that, again, in my example, and this may serve you or not, I would think about people. Again, relationships I have with people and things that I've done wrong or things that I've not done well, whatever. And the standard Buddhist response that the teachers were talking about and the book I was looking through would say that's me making and my making. It is attaching to events and situations, which, of course, getting through life, it only makes sense if we are attached to situations and identity and so on and so forth. That's the way that reality in life works, right? You have things that are yours. But in the Buddhist mindset, you don't, because everything's an illusion and nothing exists, and you're an illusion yourself, and the idea of an individual mind and of individual emotions are totally just an illusion in Buddhism. And so if you can just raise everything and say, that's not mine, that's not me. Every time you think anything about yourself, you're like, that's not me. Every time you think about someone else or something, you're just like, that's not mine. This guy gave this the teacher gave this analogy over and over again, where Buddha was hanging out with his acolytes in the park, and they were talking about attachment, and he was like, well, you see those villagers over there? There were these villagers in the forest walking around collecting branches that had fallen on the ground because they were going to go burn them, because you needed firewood. And the acolytes are like, yeah. And he was like, does that bother you? And they're like, no, it doesn't have anything to do with us. What do you mean? Why would that bother us? And he was like, and that's the way you should feel about all of your thoughts and feelings, because they're just fallen branches that are going to be burned. They're not yours. It doesn't matter. And that's okay. But I'm still not that great at releasing that attachment. So there were some things, judgments I made about other people or other people's actions that bothered me, that it was very easy to be like, oh, that's not mine. That's not me. And I've been practicing that for a few years with some Polish proverb meme I saw on Facebook that was like, not my circus, not my monkeys. And I'm partially Polish, so it's fun to be able to feel like that's a bit of wisdom. And not my circus, not my monkeys is good, but also just not me, not mine about things that really aren't. And that's a good level of discernation. However, about things that do seem important to me, and I think that this is okay because we have to be with where we're at. With the things that do seem important to me, I say not now. And that served me very well, because when choosing to do something, and a lot of you are just like, yeah, I've lived my whole life like this. For me, I have a specific difficulty of choosing to do something and not doing it. I just get distracted. I don't know, I was classified as having ADD when I was a kid, and I've never taken Ritalin or anything, so, never prescribed Ritalin. But that, that's the thing, is that if you have something that somebody's classified you with a mental thing, or your mental thing about being easily distracted and wanting to multitask all the time and wanting to distract yourself all the time, and even if you're not aware of that aspect of yourself, you probably have some of that because you're human and you're alive right now. Being able to choose what it is you're going to focus on, and in this case, just focusing on the breath, it's so minimal that I found it incredibly difficult. I've been meditating almost 20 years, and I know a lot of different things, but they're all about doing things, like reciting mantras or visualizing things or feeling energy flowing, which I'm actually really good at. But it's doing. I'm really good at doing things on an ethereal realm, as opposed to just perceiving. So just perceiving, just being physically attentive to the breath allows the mind to focus and center. And one of the things the teacher described as well is that samadhi is often translated as concentration. And a lot of Buddhists will talk about being able to get to concentration, and that makes a lot of sense in our culture of trying to achieve things, and you have to be concentrated efforts, concentrated mind to do something. But like the fairy kingdom, everything gets smaller when you concentrate. You go in, and when you go in the fairy kingdom or in the ethereal realm, the more focused and inside you get, the actual bigger the mind becomes, the bigger the perception, the bigger the consciousness gets. And if you think of it in terms of letting go, the consciousness that you agree to that makes you up, and your attachments and understandings of reality is constantly juggling 18,000 balls of consciousness, like being aware of the things you have to do and the person you are and were and all of the history and all of the things you're going to do, and all the people in your life and all the politics you've heard of and all of the television shows you know the stories of in your mind and all the books you've ever read that you like to think of and the pop songs that are playing in your head. Your consciousness is really busy maintaining reality and the structure of reality. So if you choose to focus on one thing that's actually quite arbitrary and completely transitory, the breath passing in and out of your mouth, in and out of your nose, and that's one of the reasons that Buddhists like to use it, is everything on this plane is actually totally transitory and insubstantial, and like the breath. But without the breath, you wouldn't be alive. Much like everything else here, everything you know wouldn't exist, or your life wouldn't exist without everything you know, and yet it's just as insubstantial as the air. So that's why they use it as a perfect metaphor. But if you can just choose to focus on one thing, all of the busyness of your consciousness juggling the entirety of your life, me, mine, falls away, and your consciousness can open. In being focused on one thing, can open to infinity, which is, the mind. I think the mind would be classified as actually infinite. One of the things that Buddhists often say a lot is that you don't talk about my mind, you talk about the mind. And a lot of other religions have this thing as well, although they talk about it in different ways, that there's an illusion of separation, but there's not actually any separation. Like everything that exists is just one thing. And I have always thought that since I thought things. Like once I passed through puberty, and I was like, wow, my view of reality. We're all just one thing, pretending to be 10,000 things, or at this point, billions and billions of things. So by freeing the mind from the illusion of Dominic Vine of the Owls, from freeing the mind from the illusion of your life and letting it be infinite, you have to hook it on something to allow everything else to drop away. Like that. Like it's an anchor. You have to anchor it so that everything else can drop away. When I was younger, I was really interested in the idea of learning how to astral project. And I remember one of the pieces of advice they gave was you have to anchor in your body and connect your mind or spirit or whatever, soul, by a silver thread so that you could get back to your body so you wouldn't be lost. And so this all of a sudden, as I'm talking, because talking is kind of how I make sense of the world, and writing and talking, I'm doing this for me more than you, but I'm doing this for all beings. That by anchoring the mind, then you can really let go. By just having one tiny point, the least amount of connection possible, then you can release. And when you release and everything else falls away, you're floating free in infinity. That gives you perspective. And that's really what we're looking for here, is a way of being able to release and have perspective on the truth of the matter, which is ultimately everything and nothing, which is unsayable and unknowable, but residing in it gives one true freedom, liberation, which is what